family. All right, we can get this show started. Sorry for the slight delay. Uh, yeah, I had to go to the door. I ordered me a watch, new Samsung Watch 8. I had the 5, which I'm wearing now, but I had a couple, the 8 had a couple of things that I needed to want to monitor. It had a couple of features that I wanted to help with my new healthy journey. And of course, they had all day to deliver it. But it did not get delivered until time for the show. So, okay. Hold on. That echo always tripped me out when I got the phone. So happy to be here with you for another episode of Soul Swami Live Thursday Night Book Club. If you're new here, it's Soul Swami. We come together to create a collective energy of healing, evolution, and all of those good things, because the healing process is really communal. So we create a collective energy of people who are in the boat of evolving to the best version of themselves. You can catch our show every Tuesday and Thursday. Tonight, Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, is Book Club, where we are going to continue, which is a spinoff of our Tuesday night show really, in an effort to allow you to connect with that childlike energy in you by letting someone read to you. What is going on? Yeah, by letting someone read to you. And then we also have our Tuesday night show, which is all around healing. Specifically, we learn new perspectives, because perspectives are the tools that we use to navigate life. We do activities. We have live energy readings. As a matter of fact, this week we are on the ego. We just finished up the ego as a functional identity, and we're moving into it as a spiritual identity next. You can catch both of these shows on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Instagram. Welcome back, Instagram. Instagram been giving me a headache this last couple of weeks. It wasn't letting me to connect to Instagram and Facebook at the same time, so I had to choose, and I just choose Facebook over that, because although I have some followers on Instagram, my Facebook family winds up being a little more active. So, but tonight we got Instagram back. Woo, woo, woo. Round of applause for Instagram. Also, if you're new here, we generally do a little bit of energy work before we get started, which is whatever you like to label them, whether you call them chakras, energy points, or just spaces that you want to work on. That's where we are. So this week we are on the throat. You gotta forgive me sometime. I do a lot of healing work with my hands. And my hands are very good at transferring energy, right? We already learned energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred. And my hands are very good at transferring energy. And sometimes I catch myself. So I touch my throat to tell you about it, and I can feel the energy. So I felt like my throat needed a little bit of work. Your throat is the energy point for your authenticity, your communication, healthy communication, unhealthy, whatever, but it's for your communication. It is your expression, how you express yourself, and truth, yours, mine, and others, right? If you are into color therapy, you want to think light blue. color for your throat is light blue. So eat some light blue foods. I'm laughing because the first thing that popped in my mind was blue cotton candy. Well, I love cotton candy. I hadn't eaten cotton candy in I don't know how long. I'm on this seriously healthy journey. So eat some more blue food. I mean, some more blue foods. Wear some light blue colors. Easy if you a Carolina fan. Spend some time in the light blue light. Light therapy is fantastic for activating energy. And yeah, those are all good for color therapy. If you are into aromatherapy, you want to think aromatherapy or essential oils, you want to think chamomile is good for your throat, your communication. Peppermint is good for your throat. Peppermint is good for a lot of things. It's good for help you go to sleep. It's good for keeping animals away from your garden. Peppermint has a lot of things for it. Cypress and bergamot are all good scents for activating your throat, your communication, your authenticity, your expression, and your truth. If you are into crystals and gemstones, you want to think turquoise. My turquoise didn't last long with me at all. It did its job and disappeared. So I was looking for it. I know it fell, but it must have fell into oblivion because it's not like you fall on the floor. I should see you on the floor, but I have not seen that ring in a minute, so it didn't like me. Aquamarine is good for your throat, your communication, your authenticity, your expression, and your truth. Lapis lazuli and blue lace agate. That's the ring I always wear. I do a lot of communication, so it makes sense for me to wear a blue lace agate ring. I carry that energy everywhere I go. So next thing we do is a little bit of sound therapy. I'm excited about my new rain drum. So I brought out the rain stick and the new rain drum for some of our sound therapy. But we always start with a little bit of the bowl, so we're going to start with that too. Right now, during the sound therapy session, all you really have to do is just relax. Get rid of the energy, rid yourself, transmute whatever word you would like to, but release the energies and stresses of the day and bring in a calming energy that will allow you to be able to enjoy being read to and sharing that collective energy with the rest of the family. So just relax. And after this, we'll do some breath work, affirmations, and then we'll jump into the book. So this is the new boop, 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 boop. The new rain stick, a circle rain stick. They say it's a ocean drum, but it's more of a rain stick. I got wave drums as well, and they definitely have a different sound than this. This always reminds me of it raining in the country, or if you live in one of those places where they have metal roofs, tin roofs, that rain tapping on that tin roof has somewhat of this sound effect. So I love the new one. I'll probably get me another one. It was one that I saw, but I took a chance to test this one out. But I love the little design on it. I think it's pretty awesome. But yeah. Next thing we do is our breath work. We did a new one on Tuesday, and I think I want to do that one again today. It is 505. If you're unfamiliar with breath work, the numbers tell you how long to inhale, how long to hold, and then how long to release. So with 505, it is inhale for 5 seconds, hold for 0 seconds, and then release for 5 seconds. All of these breathwork exercises that we do are for you to learn that new skill and incorporate when you're frustrated, when you need clarity, when you need to change and transmute the energy that you are functioning in. It'll help keep you grounded. So today we're going to do 505. Breathe in for a 5 count, hold for 0 count, and exhale for a 5 count. But all you really have to do is just listen to the sound of my voice, and I will guide you through the exercise myself, right? So on the count of 3, family, we'll start with 505 breath work. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold 0, release 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold 0, release 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold 0, release 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Last time, family. Breathe in 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold 0, release 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Next, I want you to repeat these affirmations after me, along with breath work. Incorporate these things into your life to help remind you of how important you are, how valuable you are, and how worthy you are. Help keep you grounded and to change the energy. So just repeat the affirmations after me. I speak and hear truth. I communicate honestly. I live an authentic life. I am fearless and free. I trust what I have to say. I speak and hear truth. I communicate honestly. I live an authentic life. I am fearless and free. And I trust what I have to say. All right, family. We can get this show cracking, but before we do, this is your reminder that you can purchase the 7 Spaces of Healing for yourself This is a good foundational, good starting point as you begin your evolution to becoming the best version of yourself. It talks about 7 spaces that you want to create in your internal world for yourself, and then those same 7 spaces that you want to make sure that you're a part of. Because remember, healing, evolution, all of those things are a communal event. You need a space of love, a space of healing, a space of solitude, a space for trust, a space for risk without judgment, a space for accountability, and a space for forgiveness of yourself and others. That environment of forgiveness is very important, right? Oh, forgot. You can get this book on Amazon. It's an ebook or softback, what we like to say here, even though I know it's paperback, but I had a tendency to call it softback a bunch. All right, so where are we now? We know Apollo has dug up his son, and now he's at the only forest in New York City, and he actually seen his wife. He followed some weird dude from Starbucks. He was in the coffee shop, followed some weird dude from Starbucks, and the weird dude went straight to the forest and dropped off some lunch, and that's how he saw his wife. Excuse me. I think he dug up his son, he saw his wife, and trying not to get arrested. I think that's pretty good. There we are. So family, read along. We're on chapter. Yeah, he just talked to his homeboy, Patrice. And he was telling Patrice, he was getting ready to tell Patrice what he saw. But Patrice was telling him to go to this guy's house, 124 something, 86th Road in Forest Hills. And he wanted to tell Patrice that he saw his wife. But they also know that wild dude, William Wheeler, has tapped their phone or his computer. He's a computer. I ain't going to say he's a computer genius, but he's a hacker, has some hacker friends. So he's been using Patrice's camera and speakers to hear everything. So when he called Patrice, he was a little nervous that William Wheeler might still be listening. So we're on chapter 84, page 369. Overcast morning. The snow hadn't snuck, so the park sagged everywhere, as if a damp blanket had been cast over the land. The limbs of the bare trees hung low, and those that still had leaves hung even lower. Great swaths of grass lay matted. The single concrete road that wound through the middle of Forest Park had been soaked so dark it looked freshly laid. Apollo left the bathroom with the suitcase and went to find Emma. He had just thawed out, and he went to Forest Hills, whatever. So it was unique that Patrice called him, and he was already in Forest Hills. But he trying to dodge the police because the police were getting to him. So he broke into a bathroom in the park, and he stayed there overnight, where he saw Patrice. I mean, not Patrice, but he saw his wife, Emma. He tried the carousel and then the George Suford Sr. band shell, which looked like the kind of places somebody might hide to protect against the elements. Did Emma need such protection? The woman he'd seen last night seemed to generate her own weather system. Apollo walked until midday but never caught sight of Emma. For all he knew, they were separated by little more than a few dozen trees. When you were inside the thickest parts of the northern forest, it was possible to forget you were in one of the most densely populated cities on the planet in the 21st century. It could be 100 years in the past, or 1,000 or more. Apollo wandered in the wilderness, and who knew what else was in there too? Eventually, he had to give in and give up, and by noon, he'd left the forest and found the sidewalk surrounding the park. Now he and his suitcase made their way toward 86th Road, Little Norway. Apollo had seen this area only in the dark, and literally the name only from the cops who stopped him. What did he expect to see now? What he got would have been familiar almost anywhere in the borough. One family homes with aluminum siding walls, mid-price sedans and minivans parked on the street and in the driveways, small front lawns behind chain link fences, and satin window treatments in every room. Little Norway could have been Little Ecuador, or Little Korea, or Little Ghana. The flags might differ, but the stages were the same. Apollo stopped at the address Patrice gave him. He found a 3-story house, one of the largest and oldest on the block. No car in the driveway. The windows were all blocked by yellowing blinds. Apollo brought his suitcase up a small flight of stairs, right to the front door. No bell, so he knocked. No answer, so he kept knocking, but eventually he gave up. When he turned to the street, he saw a neighbor watching him from the house across the street. Man or woman, young or old, he couldn't say. The window treatments hid the details. How soon before more cops were called? Apollo descended the stairs and wheeled his suitcase down the block. He spent half a day in the park looking for Emma. Now he'd have to do the same, hunting for the person who lived here. If he couldn't just sit on the steps, he'd make the circuit around the block. How long could it take before Jorgen Nutchinson returned? It turned out to be hours. By the time the old Viking showed up, the sun was going down. Apollo's knees hurt. He hadn't had anything to eat or drink since yesterday. As a result, he felt so starved he thought he was hallucinating when he saw the white-haired cogger appear on the block. He carried two large white plastic bags, both heavy with goods, moving slowly. When he passed under the street lamp, Apollo could see the man muttering as he walked. Apollo stopped at the far corner of the 86th Road, right in the middle of the street. A woman had to beep 3 times to get him out of the way. The old man looked up once he heard the car horn, and there stood Apollo Kagwa, but the guy didn't seem to notice. Instead, he resumed that hobbled march until he reached the 3-story house, climbed the stairs, unlocked the front door, and went inside. Apollo counted to 100 before he moved up the block. When he reached the house, he actually gasped. The old man had left the front door wide open. The little light above the front entrance turned on. Apollo almost took the stairs. Almost. He set his foot on the first stair but stopped himself before he tried the second. He watched the open front door. He looked both ways. Many of the other houses on the block showed lights on the first floor and a few on the second. People were home, but no one seemed to be watching him at this moment. And yet, he hesitated to simply walk inside. He looked behind him, but didn't see anyone peeking out from behind the curtains there. Apollo walked around the side of the house and down the open driveway. Houses like this always had more than one entrance. He found a second door along the side. He assumed this one led down to the basement, but this door had no handle, no lock either. After only a second standing there, a light flared on above his head, and he leapt backwards, letting the loose suitcase fall, scanning in all directions. He stood in a place, and after another moment, the light snuffed out. Apollo stepped at the door again, and the light, on a motion sensor, flipped on again. Apollo pressed the door at once, but it was barred from the inside. He stepped back, and the driveway returned to darkness. He picked up the suitcase handle and went further along the house. all the way around the back, and here he found a third door. It opened with the turn of the handle. Apollo left his suitcase outside. He didn't want to worry about running out with it if things came to that. Inside, he found a short set of stairs that led up to a kitchen. Two plastic bags set on the kitchen counter. A large pot set on the burner. The flame turned high, but the water inside still felt cold. Apollo stood quietly in the large, outdated kitchen. There were two open doorways out of this kitchen leading to the rest of the first floor. Oh no. No. There were two doorways out of the kitchen leading to the rest of the first floor, one opening onto a dining room and the other a hallway. He moved toward the hallway and leaned out. From there, it was a straight path to the front door. The front door remained open. He stood there a moment, listening for the old man, but heard nothing. He moved to the other doorway and entered the dining room. There was a large dining table covered with mail and newspapers, circulars, all still in the rubber bands. A mound of stuff, some spilling onto the floor. Apollo moved around the far side of the table, trying to keep silent, stepped softly. He moved alongside the table. He found the old man. He stood with his back to Apollo. He waited at the threshold of the front door, hidden right behind it. In his left hand, he had a large boning knife. Apollo scanned the table for some kind of weapon, or at least something he could use as a defense. He touched his hand to the nearest rolled up newspaper, and just as he lifted it, the old man turned. Apollo raised the newspaper like a club. The old man pointed his knife at Apollo. "I'm going to tell you a story about a little boy," he said. Chapter 85. The old man spoke as he and Apollo faced each other in that dining room. One man poised with the boning knife, the other with a rolled up newspaper. A standoff on the blue shag carpeting. "There was once a farmer who had 3 sons," the old man began. "His farm was so badly off that none of them ever had enough to eat. A large, good forest sat right nearby, and the oldest brother went off one day to chop wood. He hoped to get enough wood to pay off their father's debts and finally have some money of their own. But he returned before even an hour's time, and he would not speak of what happened. He had no wood with him. The second son was sent next. He snatched the family's axe from the older brother and marched off into the woods, but he returned even sooner than the older brother. This time, he returned not only without wood, but also without the family's axe. The old farmer was distraught. Only his youngest son remained, and he was just a boy. But the youngest, Askeladden, didn't even wait for the sun to rise before going out into the woods. The moon lit the sky, and the boy left without telling his father or his brothers that he was going. He entered the woods as quietly as he could, and in no time he found the family's axe. It was still stuck in the shaggy fir tree right where the middle brother had left it, and just below that was a mark in the fir tree where the eldest brother had swung the same axe. Curious. Askeladden then heard something moving through the trees. The ground shook and the tops of the trees shivered as something enormous came closer. The boy needed to hide, but the forest floor had no such places. If he could reach the upper branches of this fir tree, he thought, he could disappear into the leaves, but the limbs were too high up. Then he remembered the axe. He was still small enough that he could climb onto the handle and use it like a stair without shaking it loose. From the place on the handle, he could jump and reach the lowest branch. He climbed almost to the top of the fir tree, and there he hid. The cuts the brothers made had caused the sap to leak from the tree, but Askeladden didn't realize it until he stopped climbing. His hands and feet were wet with the stuff, strong scent of wood and resin. He tried to wipe it off, but very quickly he had to be still. Out of the woods came an enormous troll, 6 stories high, with shoulders as wide as a bull. It was hideous and smelled of swamp rot. It growled and coughed. When it bumped the fir tree, poor Askeladden was almost thrown to his death. The troll sniffed the air. If the sap hadn't been on the boy's hands and feet, the troll would have smelt him right away. They can track the scent of human flesh like sharks track blood. But still, it knew something was wrong. Hadn't there been 2 other boys in the woods not long before? It pulled a face of rage. Who dares come into my woods, the troll howled. I will eat his bones. Askeladden had an idea. He shouted, my head is right there on the ground. Why don't you try to crack my skull? The troll bent low and found a stone on the ground the size of a boy. I have you, he shouted, and bit down hard, but immediately he howled, my teeth! You have broken my teeth with your thick skull. I will do better with your bones instead. The troll became so angry it could hardly think. This time the boy shouted, I have no bones. I am made of wood, you stupid troll. Stupid am I? Shouted the troll. Then I will chop you to pieces. But where will you find an axe, you buffoon? Taunted Askeladden. There is one here, the troll bellowed. I will chop down this whole forest to find you. The troll had fallen into a fury, and not being very bright, he began chopping at every tree nearby. Finally, that fir tree was the only one left in the wood. All the rest had been chopped into small pieces. Now I have you, the troll called. He raised his axe to fell the last tree. But his chopping had taken all night, and now it was morning. As the troll raised the axe, the sun finally rose, and that troll was turned to stone by daylight. Askeladden climbed down. He tried to push the stone troll over because he wanted his father's axe, but eventually he gave up. It was too big and heavy to budge. But what did it matter? The boy realized that with all the wood the troll chopped, his father would be a rich man and more than able to afford a new one. And they lived happily ever after. The old man cleared his throat. He waggled the knife so the tip of the blade seemed to be sniffing the air. Why did I tell you that story? The old man asked. What did I want you to hear? He paused here a moment and watched Apollo. I have no fucking idea, Apollo said. Eventually, my father told it to me, and his father told it to him, and on like that. We're from Norway originally, and we brought the tale with us. There are a lot of stories about that boy, Askeladden. He always beats the monsters and comes away with some treasure. It's nice stuff to hear when you're a pup. The old man waved to take in the run-down living room, worn carpet, frayed curtains, and cluttered dining room table with room enough for only one. But now, I think I hate those fairy tales. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace, as if used to be argued with. Not really the tales, but how they end. 3 words that ruin everything. Happily ever after. He stuck his tongue out as if tasting something bitter and bile. Happily ever after, he repeated, even when they don't say it in the story. Those 3 words are there. Take my story just for example. Will Askeladden's father became truly wealthy and have enough money to send 3 sons to university, or only 1 or 2? How does he decide? The youngest beat the troll, but the oldest boy is still firstborn and deserves the spoils, no? What about when the fathers died? Did he leave a will? Will there be an equitable distribution of his assets? If not, will the sons all retain legal counsel and spend the next 20 years in court haggling over the estate? Okay. The old man laughed bitterly. Happily ever after won't prepare you for that. I know that's right, for sure. I've seen myself, man. Death in the family bring out the worst of the families. People be fighting hard over things that they didn't earn in their own lives. Personally, he continued, I always thought it was there to shut a child up. It's bedtime, and you just told this incredible story, and a child, as children do, wants to know more. Did they throw a party for Askeladden when he got home? Did the brothers and the fathers go out to the wood to see the troll that had turned to stone? Did Askeladden ever marry? If so, what was she like? And did they have children of their own? What were they called? All of them. This is what children will be saying, should be saying, after a tale like that. But by then, it's already too late. And you've been up all day working, and now you just want to go to sleep. And in fact, this child is starting to really get on your nerves with all these questions. Always more questions. So you lean close and say, what happened next? They live happily. For how long? Your beautiful babies ask. Forever, you say. Now go to sleep. The old man sighed. And your lovely, stupid child believes you. Then he grows up and tells the same lie to his daughters, and she tells them to her sons. Then finally, it has to be true, because why else would my good, caring family have passed it on for so very long? Do you know how much harm happily ever after has done to mankind? I wish they said something else at the end of those stories instead. They tried to be happy, or eternal happiness is fruitless pursuit. What do you think? You're definitely Norwegian, Apollo said. He lowered the knife. Why don't we go into the kitchen, he said. The water's probably boiling, and I'm making a meal for her. No more Starbucks, Apollo asked. The old man dropped his head. Normally I cook her food myself, but yesterday morning she told me exactly where to go and when to go there. Isn't that funny? Never once has that happened before, but then snap, just like that, she sends me there. I know, Apollo said. I saw you. Wouldn't it be funny if, he began, if she'd known that you'd be there? The old man, Jorgen Knudsen, swept his free hand over his wild white hair. Forgive me, I've been drinking, he said. Today? Every day. His eyes fluttered with weariness. Apollo looked toward the kitchen where he could hear the water rolling. What are you making? He asked. Shamalov? He said. It's Norwegian, just like my story. Let me show you. He gestured toward the kitchen with the blade. Apollo waved the newspaper. You go first. Okay? Facts. Chapter 86. Okay. The water had indeed come to a boil. The old man set the boning knife on the counter and turned to the plastic bags on the small kitchen table. He reached into one, but kept his gaze on Apollo. He pulled something large out of the bag. It was wrapped in wax paper. He set it on the counter. It was as big as a bowling ball, but oval shaped. The old man folded the empty plastic bag neatly and opened a cupboard under the sink where he had stacked of the exact same plastic bag, also folded. He added the new one, then shut the door and returned to the kitchen table. He unfolded the wax paper, that snapping sound as it came flat. A sheep's head lay on the table. Apollo audibly gagged. The old man laughed quietly as he wagged a finger at Apollo. You can't be disgusted, he said. This is a tradition from our home country, and we must never judge anyone's traditions. Be politically correct, or I will protest you. No judging, just acceptance. Well, here it is. Accept it. Now he slapped a hand on the side of the sheep's head. He made it made a wet squelch and spun a few degrees so that his mouth pointed directly at Apollo. Its lower teeth, a row of small, discolored pegs, jutted out past slightly open lips. The skin and the fleece had been removed so the head shone a reddish pink under the kitchen lights. It still had his eyes. Each looked like a globe of black jelly set into a puted red flesh. The old man grabbed it by the snout and in one motion lifted it, brought it to the pot of boiling water, and dropped it in. A small amount of scalding water flew out the pot, some of it landing on the old man's forearm, but if it hurt, he showed no signs. He simply turned back to Apollo and clapped. A proud chef. He scanned the countertop and grabbed a novelty kitchen timer that was made to look like a fluffy white sheet. If I don't use the timer, I'll forget the head is boiling, the old man said. He held up the display screen, which was set in the center of the sheep's belly. I let it go 3.5 hours so the meat isn't too tough or too soft. Apollo nodded because he simply couldn't keep up. The open front door, the old man hiding in wait with a knife, the tale of Ascaleddon and a troll, and now sheep's head boiling in a pot. And he thought the island had been as wild as things would get. My wife, Apollo said, the words like a lifeline. He raised his free hand to show the red string on his finger. I don't care about all that other shit. I just come to find Emma. You must approach her with caution, the old man said as he set the timer on the counter. There are ways such things must be done. He pointed at the pot with an offering. The old man walked to the fridge, opened it, and reached inside. He pulled out a bag of potatoes. He walked back to the counter and dropped them with a thump. He returned to the fridge once more and revealed a green bottle with no label. That's a strange wedding ring, the old man said, pointing at Apollo's left hand. Is hers made of barbed wire? He took the coffee mug out of the sink, opened the green bottle, and poured a clear liquid in it. He set the bottle down. It took you months to finally show up, he said. I thought you'd get here sooner. This hit Apollo so hard, he dropped the rolled up newspaper on the table. You know about my wife and son, don't you? I do. From a cabinet by the sink, he took out an 8-ounce bottle of Ensure. He poured the chalky white drink into the mug that held the clear liquid. He switched the cup around and mixed the two. He took a big gulp. His top lip showed faint cream mustache. Now you can help me then. He took a second gulp from the coffee mug, then turned away from Apollo. He picked up the potato and peeled it over the kitchen sink. Do I want to help you? He asked. You helping my wife, Apollo said. The old man finished with the first potato and got to work peeling the second. The old man looked out the window above the sink into a modest paved yard behind his home. Up the slope of the block, he could see the trees of Forest Park. Ever since your wife appeared, I haven't had a night's rest, he said. All of my life I've slept well, even as a baby, my mother told me, but now it's 120 days without a good night's rest. He dropped the second peeled potato on the counter with a thunk. And it's all because of your wife. He looked over his shoulder at Apollo. Will you prepare the cabbage? Apollo watched him stupefied. You have to core it first, pointing at the second supermarket bag impatiently. A grandfather supervising his grandson for the afternoon. When Apollo still didn't move, the old man took out the cabbage and brought it to the table on a cutting board. Apollo would have argued more, but there on the board, he'd also set out a large utility knife with a serrated blade. Better than a rolled up newspaper as far as weapons went. The old man watched Apollo calmly. Apollo pulled the board to himself, picked up the knife. The old man then turned his back to Apollo and went under the counter for a smaller pot in which to boil the potatoes. The enormous pot of the sheep's head continued to burble and broil. Georgian Knudsen, Apollo said, picking up the knife. For the first time, the old man went rigid. He turned from the cupboard and stared at Apollo, but in a moment he recovered his wary whimsy. It might have been that liquor kicked in. Joe, he said. Here in the United States, everyone calls me Joe. In America, your name must be convenient or it must be changed. Jorgen rose slowly, filled the pot with water. So I'm guessing you know William Wheeler, Apollo said. Jorgen took another pull from the coffee mug, then refilled it with liquor and Ensure. Is that what he's calling himself? He said. Nothing more. He drank instead. Apollo cut the cabbage into quarters, then used the knife to slice out a wedge of cabbage core. Jorgen set the small pot on another burner, and then there was the sound of a tick, tick, tick as the pilot light caught and the halo of blue flame appeared. When he looked at Apollo, he seemed pleased. Now chop the cabbage very fine. He put out his hand for bits of core, and Apollo handed them to you. Instead of going into the trash bin, he pulled out a small pail from under the sink. He dropped the bits of core inside. He caught Apollo staring. You do compost, don't you? Apollo brought the knife down into the first section of cabbage, chopping it into fine strips. When Brian had been first born, Emma hadn't been able to cook anything, of course, and had fallen to Apollo to prepare the food from his admittedly limited repertoire. Now he felt himself transported back into that sensation of preparation and responsibility. He was making a meal for Emma. Because Apollo lost himself in the work, it took a few moments before he realized Jorgen had started speaking to himself under his breath. He removed the third pot from the cupboard. He came to the kitchen table and swept the cabbage Apollo had chopped and returned to the counter. He found a bag of flour and poured some in, estimating the proper amount with precise ease. He finished another gulp from the mug. He recited lines from Outside Over There as he dropped salt and caraway seeds into the cabbage. I do not like caraway seeds. They feel like my stomach cannot digest them. It feel like they be shredding the inside of my stomach. Lord have mercy. You never had caraway seeds. It's some rye breads you can get them. But if you looking at rye breads, they'll be in the area of rye bread. It'll be some version of it with caraway seeds. Apollo joining him for word. This stopped Jorgen's pattern. Why did you say that? He snapped. I thought we recited together. You know it? He asked. What is it? A song? A book, Apollo said. A fairy tale. He snorted. Of course. My father used to read it to me when I was a baby. That book exactly? Have you ever wondered why? Apollo tapped the tip of the blade against the table. Yes, but I don't know. Jorgen turned from the oven. He gulped down the rest of the potion in his mug, then bumped the side of the cup against his forehead. I hear her in here day and night, even right now as I'm speaking. Your wife, she repeats and repeats the words of that book, and I can't drown it out no matter what I try. I can't get any sleep because of it. She's torturing me. He pulled the mug away from his forehead and peered in. I don't know how she's doing it. Do you? She's a witch, Apollo said, and almost sounded proud. He's finished chopping. Jorgen reached around the table for a cutting board, but Apollo held on to the knife. You scared of Emma? He said. Yes, Jorgen said. I am. He looked at the cutting board in his hand with some surprise. He set it back down in front of Apollo as if there were more work to be done. He looked back at the timer. 3 hours before the sheep heads would be ready. I hear her voice, Jorgen said, and at night from my bedroom, I see her out there, walking in the woods. I see her blue light. A witch? Yes. Did you know that's who you'd marry? Jorgen didn't leave time for a response. He brought one hand to the collar of his shirt. He undid the top 2 buttons and pulled back the fabric. A bright red vertical scar appeared near the base of his throat, hardly healed. I did this 2 months ago. I hit a vein, but not an artery. I bled a lot, but only gave myself a real sore throat. The doctor prescribed Ensure because I can't eat solid food. I add liquor to wash it down. That's a family prescription. It's called Brenivin. Hmm? Went to the ICU, but I came back home in 4 days. I couldn't even sleep while I was in Jamaica hospital, not even with sedatives. I heard her all the time, even there. I know she will never forgive me. Now Jordan slipped into the seat across from Apollo. You stole our son? The words so low they hardly registered. No, Jordan said, not me. I'm too old. He looked up at the ceiling, but when I was younger, yes, I did my service. Service? Apollo repeated. The word singed his tongue. Jorgen set both hands flat on the tabletop. The man had been so commanding as a prepared meal. Sitting like this, though, across the table in the kitchen with linoleum floors and cheap particle board cupboards, he settled into his age and his drunkenness and his tortured feelings. He seemed to decline right in front of Apollo. I want you to see the living room, he said. No point in trying to avoid it anymore. He looked at the pots on the oven and nodded faintly. She won't appear without an offering, so there's no point in rushing. He set his hand on the table and pushed himself up. Apollo slid out from his seat and peeked into the boiling water. The sheep's head half shifted, so it grinned right up at him. He followed Jorgen out of the kitchen. He held that utility knife. We might do 2 more chapters, family, then we'll wrap up Thursday. Jorgen led Apollo out of the kitchen and across the hallway. The old man opened the door to a den and stepped in. He waved for Apollo to follow. Jorgen's den had a rectangular shape, as long as the kitchen and dining room combined. The floor had that hideous blue shag carpeting too, and the walls were painted a very faint yellow. It was almost nauseating combination of colors. Add to that how much hotter this room felt. The dining room had been chilly, and the kitchen warm because of the oven, but this room practically boiled. Bad enough that Apollo had to undo his jacket and take off his knit hat. He felt like the sheep skull dropped in the pot. There were 3 space heaters on the floor, in a row along the walls, all 3 on the highest setting. They were the kind that Patrice and Dana had used in their basement apartment, the kind Apollo recognized from his childhood. They looked like enormous toaster ovens. Each had grill work facade, and behind it coils that ran bright orange. If they were left on for hours, they tended to rattle and give off a static buzzing. The 3 space heaters in the den were doing exactly that now, rattling and buzzing. Jorgen had been running them a long time. The den was divided in half lengthwise by 2 tall black Japanese folding wall panels. The shitty black lacquered kind, the type sold only in the bleakest of neighborhoods. 8 panels altogether, a series of outstretched cherry blossom designs. With both fully extended, Apollo couldn't see what hid on the other side of the den. On this side, the 3 space heaters on the ground, Jorgen, and a small handful of framed pictures hung on the wall, hovering a few feet above the heaters. Apollo couldn't make out the images from in the doorway. Jorgen walked closer to those framed pictures, but Apollo stayed still. He felt a whiff of cool air and looked to his right. Down the long hallway, he saw the front door of Jorgen's home. It remained wide open. Winter air free to sneak inside. Apollo had the urge to walk down there and shut the door, but Jorgen began talking. The first immigrant to have an impact on Queens was Laurentide Ice Sheet. 20,000 years ago, Jorgen said. The northern hemisphere was in an ice age, and the glacier of Labrador, we call it Canada now, spread itself across the border that had yet been drawn up. Jorgen beckoned for Apollo, but still Apollo didn't move any closer. He scanned the room again, those Japanese screens, wondering if someone, something, might be hiding on the other side. Meanwhile, this old man wanted to talk about glaciers. The ice sheet reached Wisconsin, then Michigan, Jordan continued. Central Indiana, Illinois, nothing could stop it. It moved rock and split the earth. When the glacier reached New York, the ice sheet was 1,000 feet thick, almost as tall as the Empire State Building. When it finally stopped moving, it lay here, across what would eventually be called New York City for the next 2,500 years. Eventually, the world warmed up again, and that ice glacier melted away. But by then, it had done something miraculous. It had moved enough stone and earth to make a great barrier between the land and the sea. It pushed the Atlantic Ocean back. If it wasn't for that glacier, all of Queens and Brooklyn would still be underwater today. We'd be underwater right now. All of that thanks to one Canadian. Jorgen grinned at Apollo and waved for him once more. His gestures to the photos hung on the wall. Apollo finally approached, but since he wasn't a fool, he peeked behind the Japanese panels, no one there. Only the same blue shag carpet on the ground. There were no space heaters on that side. The long wall showed many more framed photos all hung up. 100 pictures, maybe more. It put Apollo in the mind of a family album. Instead of collecting them in a book, they were spread across the wall. He could see they were pictures of people, but before he could only focus. Jorgen came for him. Please, Apollo, Jorgen touched his arm. Apollo turned. How had that old man come so closely so quickly? It was this damn shag carpet muffling the sound. Apollo came back around the Japanese panels. Only as he did this did Apollo realize something strange about the den. There weren't any windows. How was that possible in a one-family house that stood on a detached plot? The dining room had windows that faced out on the street. The kitchen looked out onto a small backyard, but this den faced only inward. Jorgen brought Apollo back to the framed photos on the wall, the ones hanging right above the 3 space heaters. The machine sent heat along Apollo's legs. I told you about the first immigrant, Jordan said. Now let me tell you about some more recent ones. He raised one hand and tapped at the largest picture there, a framed rendering of a ship at sea. On July 5th, 1825, 52 Norwegians sailed out of the city of Stavanger in a sloop they named Restoration. Many on board were Quakers seeking religious freedom in America. The Restoration was the first organized group of Norwegian immigrants to come to the shores since the times of the Vikings. It was the Norwegian Mayflower. This sloop, was a very small vessel for such a journey, only 54 feet long and 16 feet wide. It took them 14 weeks to make the crossing. They arrived in New York Harbor on October 9th, 1825. Not one passenger died. In fact, the newspaper reported that there was even a birth on board, one girl born on board. This was without hospitals or painkillers or any of that, the old way. The space heaters buzzed now, all 3 at once, so it seemed as if some large metallic insect had landed in the windowless den. Apollo could feel sweat beading on his neck and chin. Their journey became national news because they'd made the trip on a sloop. The newspaper called the Norwegian the Sloopers. The question that most fascinated the public was how on earth these people made it across the Atlantic Ocean on this tiny ship. It seemed improbable, impossible. Even most of the people on board didn't know the truth. Their leader, Lars Larsen, spoke only of their desire for religious freedom. He spoke of the singular goodness and liberty of the United States. He said all the right things. The sloopers were granted access. They became Americans. Soon, the most important question about them was no longer asked: how they made this impossible trip, how they crossed the Atlantic. I can tell you, they had help. For an instant, Apollo felt himself back on North Brother Island and Kyle there with him as they watched the trawler chugging out on the open waters. The big one can swim, he muttered. Yes, he can, Jorgen said, watching Apollo with a look of surprise. Now Jorgen pointed to another sketch. People this time, far fewer than 53. Only three, in fact. Two women, one man. The sloopers settled around here too, but it didn't last long. Most soon followed Lars Larson and his family. They moved upstate to Orleans County. It became the first Norwegian colony in the United States since Leif Erikson reached the shores in the year 1000. Excuse me. Leif Erikson, Apollo corrected him. That's funny. A holdover of whatever he learned from some elementary class. I suppose, Jorgen said. Jorgen looked back at the sketch. These three did not want to go on, he said. Instead, they remained here in Queens, still mostly farmland then, Little Norway, as this neighborhood came to be called. The three started it. This sketch was made about 8 months after they arrived in America. Jorgen tapped the glass, the man's face beardless and thin, the ink drawn hardly qualified as a sketch, but still the eyes were vivid, much too large, which made it seem as if the man was staring at Apollo and Jorgen across time, seeing them even now. That's my ancestor, Niels, my great-great-great-grandfather. He tapped the first two of the two women, also thin and taller than Niels. Her hands were crossed in front of her. Her hair was hidden under a scarf. This is my great-great-great-grandmother, Petra. Last, he tapped the third woman, small, wearing a shawl over her dress. Her mouth had been drawn in so faintly she seemed to have none. Her eyes were tiny, hardly there. Her shoulders soft and slumped. It was as if the woman were turning into a phantom, fading away. And this is Anna Sophie, Niles' first wife. He married them both? Well, Jorgen smiled, not at the same time. All three of them were on the sloop, Apollo asked. Oh, yes, Jorgen said. Niels and Anna Sophie had been married 4 years when they boarded the Restoration. They were not Quakers, but they were ready to try their fortunes in a new place. It's possible Niels had to escape the country. I can't say. The ship's captain offered work to the men who agreed to crew the ship. Niels bargained for Anna Sophie's passage. She was already pregnant. Anna Sophie is the one who gave birth on the trip. A girl, you said. What was her name? Jorgen's hand lowered from the frame. Agnes Nutsdater. Agnes? Apollo whispered. He recovered his composure. If she was born on the ship, how come she's not in the picture? Jorgen pursed his lips. Agnes was dead by then. Anna Sophie never really recovered from the loss. My father remarried Petra eventually. Apollo looked at Anna Sophie's faded face again. Now she seemed erased by grief. What about Anna Sophie? He asked. He stuck around after the divorce. The room felt intolerably hot. Apollo sweated in front of the heaters. She went off into the forest. The forest? For what? She wanted to find her daughter. She knew Agnes was somewhere out there. What about Niels? Apollo asked, looking away from the rendering, facing Jorgen. Did Niels help her look? Did he try? Jorgen raised his hand. Well, no, of course not. But he was her father, Apollo said. He's the one who took Agnes into the woods in the first place, Jorgen said. And he's the one who left her out there in the cave. Last chapter, and then we'll wrap it up for the night, family. Chapter 88. Jorgen said something more and gestured toward the Japanese screens, but Apollo couldn't hear him. His ears had plugged, and Jorgen's words were little more than vibration against his skull. Instead, he found himself staring at the utility knife in his hand. It had been the casual tone of the words, "He's the one who left her out there in the cave." The knife began to rise as slowly as a helium balloon. Jorgen placed his hand on Apollo's, the one that held the blade. He pressed the hand back down. It settled by Apollo's side for now. Have you noticed that the stories about the first colonists in America are always about how they think the devil is living out in the woods? Jorgen peeked down at the knife quickly, with little more than a glance, and when the knife didn't raise again, he stopped holding Apollo's wrist. I'm talking about the Puritans, I guess. They came to North America and swore monsters were waiting to get them in this savage land. But maybe it was the other way around. Maybe those Puritans brought the monsters with them, unloaded them from their ships right alongside the cargo. That's what my people did. My great-great-grandfather, he brought a monster with him. It immigrated to America just like him. Did the others on the ship know? The sloopers? Jorgen patted his belly. No, I don't think so. They put their faith in the crew and their faith in God, but Niels put his faith in something older. They all had, I'm listening to the rain, so they all have him to thank for making it safe across to the America, even if none of those poor sorts ever would. People can choose ignorance, can't they? Life is easier. Ignorance is bliss. Life is easier in blinders. In my old age, now I have time to wonder about such things, though. Even if you choose to ignore the truth still changes you. I know that's facts. Jorgen pointed at the Japanese patterns again and walked around them, disappeared on the other side. Apollo looked at the knife, then at the rendering of those three people, Niels, Petra, and Anna Sophie. The heaters clattered and snapped, the heat so strong by now it felt as if they were trying to chase him away. Then, on the other side of the panels, Jorgen raised a hand and waved to Apollo, a big goofy gesture like when you're meeting a relative at the airport and you want them to see you at the arrivals. Apollo walked around the Japanese panels and joined Jorgen. The old Viking stood before the long wall where well over 100 framed photos hung. This side of the den felt significantly cooler. No heaters on the ground. Jorgen tapped at the picture frame when Apollo joined him. Hardly more than an outline, really. A child. His eyes were closed and his mouth tight, as if it was whistling. Wisps of hair splayed out over both ears. Agnes, he said. My father drew this likeness much later from memory. Jorgen took his hand away from the sketch, then brushed at the edges of the frame. That baby had been abandoned in the woods in a cave by her own father. It was too much to contemplate. Apollo looked away from the sketch to the walls, the mystery of the windowless den. Now he could see there had been windows once, but the walls had been altered. The windows had been covered. They'd been removed. This wall had been reframed, but the job still showed. The places where the new framing had been set stood out slightly from the rest of the wall, so there was a faint up and down effect, like the difference between the black keys and white keys on a piano. This variation in the wall made the frame photos seem to undulate, some pitching forward and others rolling back, an effect like watching waves. From here, he had an easier time identifying the subjects. Children. All of them were portraits of kids. a sea of small faces. Why did Niels bring the monster over? He had to leave Norway and he needed to bring his wife with him. He loved her, I expect, and didn't want to start his new life without her. But when he saw the ship those naive Quakers planned to sail, he immediately held doubts. The sloop was too small. He had to think of his family, so he brought insurance. But it came at a price. The sloopers made it to New York and scurried away upstate, but Niels and Anna Sophie and Petra stayed here in Queens. There was no park here. It was farmland, thousands of acres of forest and greens. In our homelands, these things are creatures of the natural world. Forests and mountains are where they made their lairs. Queens was a perfect place for it to settle. By 1898, the land for the park, as you see it now, was bought, and they began to design it. Golf courses, hiking paths, on and on, but it's hilly country, still lots of pockets, lots of cave, lots of places for something large to hide. Jordan Trolda. That's how we say it in Norwegian. Apollo's eyes met Jorgen's now. Niels would be his caretaker. That was part of the deal he struck in Norway, making sure it was appeased. It demanded only one thing: a child. That had been the bargain. So, one night, when he couldn't put it off any longer, Niels Knudsen took his daughter Agnes out into the woods and to the cave of the beast. He delivered her. That's wild. He dropped off his own kid. All right, family. I appreciate you as always. Thanks for joining. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Join us. I hope to have you back here Tuesday as we continue our discussions on ego. We've been learning a lot about ego. We've already done healthy ego, weak ego, fragile ego, and inflated ego. And inflated ego is probably one that's been the most amazing because many of us don't think we function in an inflated ego. I was one of those many, but found out that, inflated ego really just shows up to protect a wounded ego. And I definitely had some wounded egos at some time, so had to recognize that I function in an inflated ego. So glad we're moving out the functional idea of ego and into the spiritual idea of ego. You can catch that show 7 o'clock on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and Twitch, of course. Twitch my baby. I gotta give him a shout out. And if you can't make it here for the Tuesday show, I hope to have you back here Thursday for book club, where we will continue reading Changeling by Victor Lavalle. And before we go, I want to remind you that you can speak and hear the truth. You can communicate honestly. You can live an authentic life. And you are fearless and free, and you can trust what you have to say. I appreciate you, family, and until the next episode, peace.